So let's get started. I guess like people will be joining in throughout and we'll just have to kind of cue them in when they join in. So welcome everyone to the demo class of Hunger Games. We're gonna jump right in. We'll talk about the program a little later. Our objective of today's demo class is to kind of go through the different types of questions that appear on the GRE. So we're going to start with the different sections first, and then we're going to kind of talk about the overall test. So the first section on the GRE is the verbal section here. Okay, so as you can see that we have 3 different questions on the GRE verbal sections. The first being the reading comprehension section, then we have text completion, and then we have sentence equivalence. What we're going to do is kind of go through an example or 2 questions from each part of these question types. Let's have you guys read out the questions so we can have like a nice interactive class. Fuad, could you unmute and read the question here, please?
Yes, sure. So the question says that in parts of the Arctic, the land grades into the land fast ice so dash that you can walk off the coast and not know you are over the hidden sea.
Right. Let's not waste our brain energy tonight to kind of try and solve these questions. What we're trying to see is what kinds of questions appear on the test. So you can see that there's 1 gap, yeah, and 5 different options. You have to choose one of these options. Just a quick ground rule of GRE, if you see a round box, I mean, that's not a box, it's a circle. If you see a circular option, that means you have only one, you can choose only one of these 5 options, right? So it can be any one of these 5 options. In the next slide, this kind of shows what landfast ice is and kind of explains what this sentence means. So just on terms of basic understanding what this sentence means, the land grades into the landfast ice so dash that you can walk off the coast. This is landfast ice, this was land. You go right into the ice without knowing that you're on top of the water body, right? So that was the question. We would answer based on our understanding of the sentence of the possible options right here. The next type of text completion question is one with 2 different gaps, right? So iKryptonite, could you unmute and read out the question here, please?
Vain and prone to violence, Caravaggio could not handle success. The more his dash and artist increased, the more dash his life became.
Right. So you can see there are 2 blanks here. For the first blank, you have 3 different options. For the second blank again, you have 3 different options. You can't choose D for option for blank 1. You can't choose any of these for option blank 2, right? So these are kind of difficult in some ways, kind of helpful in other ways, because sometimes you can bounce off of these. If you can solve one part, you sometimes get a clue as to how to answer the other part of the question. It's all very relative. Once you start going through the individual specific questions, you'll see, you'll get to know many different tips and tricks, strategies of how to go about solving these questions. For example, the punctuations in these questions are very, very important. Sorry about that. You can see that this part of the previous part of this sentence, this clause does not have any blanks. So this gives you a very good hint to understand the context of the question, and then based off of that, you can then go ahead and answer the rest. As we know that a colon means that it's an explanation, sorry about the handwriting, explanation of the previous part of the previous clause, right? So if we understand this, the latter part of the sentence is simply the explanations of the previous part of the sentence. If we understand the first part, we'll be able to derive the context, and then based off of that, we can choose the correct options. Going forward, we have another text completion question. Look at the difference between the first questions and this one. Huge prompt, 3 different blanks, basically the same thing, but 3 different prompts, 3 different blanks. Each blank has 3 options to choose from. The basic construction of the question is the same, just that this takes a whole lot more effort to solve, a lot more time to read through, but is worthy of the same amount of points, right? So just 1 raw score point credited for spending so much time solving this. Strategies about whether to skip these questions or not will really depend on whether you other more concise questions that you could spend your time focusing on. But yeah, strategies of test taking strategies is a long way from right now, from the starting point. Now we're just looking at the basic question types. So we went through text completion questions in the verbal section. We saw that it can have 1, 2, or 3 blanks. This is just a quick strategy of how we go through these big intimidating question types, is that we break these huge paragraphs into individual sentences and then try to solve each sentence and each blank. So basically we just consider these questions as 3 individual text completion questions. If we can manage to solve one of these parts, then we have a hint for the next part, and so forth. Yeah, going forward to the next question type is sentence equivalence. What this question type is this isn't really something that most of us have faced during our university or school life. Kind of a new type of question. Some of us have experienced this before as well. This requires us to find 2 words from these 6 options that can produce similar meaning sentences. Hence, the naming sentence equivalence. We're trying to make 2 equivalent sentences. So let's say we've already solved this question for you. Although it does contain some pioneering ideas, one would hardly characterize the work as original, and one would hardly characterize the work as innovative. Both of these sentences would mean the exact same thing, hence these 2 options being the correct answer. Like I said before, in GRE, if you have circular options, you can only choose one of the given options. If you have square boxes, then you can choose multiple. In these sentence equivalent type questions, you have to choose exactly 2. In other types of questions, you may choose 1 or more, which means you can choose 1, 2, or all 3. In this type of question, we have to choose 2. This is another sentence equivalence type question. This is basically the exact same thing as before, just a little more complicated words in the mix. Requires a little bit of knowledge on vocabulary, how to study vocabulary, and what exactly the words are that we'll be studying. I'll go through that a little bit later. This is a new type of question, reading comprehension. So can I have one of you guys, Neil or me, kind of read the first sentence of this comprehension?
Sure, Bhara. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first line is rugwort was accidentally introduced to New Zealand in the late 19th century and, like so many invading foreign species, quickly became a pest.
Thank you. So you can see that this comprehension is about something called ragwort. It may be a pest, and then it goes on to give us more and more context on this particular thing called ragwort. We're not going to read through the whole comprehension. As you can see, it's a small paragraph. Relatively small, and that's why we have 2 questions based on this comprehension. If the paragraph were to be, like the passage were to be bigger, we'd have more questions based off of that. So more or less, your effort of reading through a larger comprehension usually results in a larger number of questions to be attempted. So you can, translate that into gaining more points as well. The same strategy as we did before with larger paragraphs, whether it be text completion or reading comprehensions, is breaking down a large paragraph into the component sentences. So we don't get to do this during an exam, but in your head, what we suggest you do is not be intimidated by the array of difficult vocabulary found in the paragraph, but try to understand one sentence at a time, get some context out of it. Maybe you'll not understand 100% of it because of those difficult vocabulary, but then you get that context and move on to the next one, take one step at a time, and you get the bigger picture in the process. More descriptive strategies on trying to solve reading comprehension questions, understanding the passages, and then using that understanding to attempt different types of questions will be found in our uh, follow-up classes. So we have a couple of examples of what question types you can expect to find after you read a reading comprehension question. So can I have Nafisa read the question here, please? Nafisa, if you can hear me, can you read the first question here?
The Yes, Bhaya. The passage suggests that the proliferation of redwoods were particularly ill-timed because it.
Okay, thank you. So this question requires you to understand that there's something first off, to understand what ragwort this particular thing is exactly is, and that something happened with ragwort, right? The proliferation of ragwort was particularly ill-timed because it. So this event is obviously explained in the passage, and we're expected to find the reason behind this proliferation, which means the increase or the outburst. A lot of ragwort happened. So the pest, let's say একটা পোকা, এই পোকাটা অনেক বেড়ে গেছিল, কেন বেড়ে, এটা বেড়ে যাওয়ার ফলে especially it was bad timing, it was particularly ill timed, তার মানে it was really really harmful, কেন very very harmful. So the consequence must have been explained in the passage, and we're expected to know what the consequence is by reading the passage and then try to find out which of these options best describes that. So you'll sometimes find, and it's more often than not, you'll find two options that relatively seem to point towards the same thing, but there's something wrong with one of this other option that's a little tricky, and then the other one that more accurately describes what is accurate with what you got from the passage. Moving on to the next type of question, as I described, when you have square boxes, you can choose one or more. So like you can see, consider each of the choice separately and select all that apply. So that doesn't mean choose all three. You can choose one, two, or three based on which ones are correct. Can I have, who do we have here that we haven't talked to already? Sumaya, read the second question here, right here.
The second question. The passage implies which of the following about the problem Robert poses to dairy farmers? Option 4.
No, that's okay. Thank you. So the passage implies which of the following about the problems ragwort poses to dairy farmers. It's a pretty easy question to understand. Ragwort is a problematic thing. It poses particular problems to farmers, to dairy farmers in particular, and the passage must have had these reasons, the problems spread, ছড়াছিটায় বলা আছে different places in the passage. We're expected to kind of mark out where those problems are written out, so we can, go back and read them now, see if that problem is mentioned. ঠিক আছে? Let's say প্যাসেজে তিনটা প্রবলেম বলা ছিল, তার মধ্যে দুইটা হচ্ছে এই দুইটা অপশনের মধ্যে আছে. So if they match, we just choose those options. Cool. Next, this is a different type of question. Let's have Fuad read the question here, please.
Yes, ma'am. Select the sentence that distinguishes cattle and sheep's susceptibility to ragwort.
Mhm. So select the sentence. As you can see, this is the passage that we are tackling. Verbatim পুরোটুকি তুলে দেওয়া হয়েছে. Each of these sentences in the actual test, if you hover your mouse above, if you hover your mouse above this sentence, it will fill up. Okay, so like a light gray shadow চলে আসবে. When you select it, you'll see the selection marker. So like highlights এর মতন হয়ে যাবে. Let's say if I selected the first sentence, it would have like the highlight, the gray highlight. ঠিক আছে, permanently selected. So you can see যে আমি select করছি অথবা একটা sentence select করছি. You can change your selections and then next যাওয়ার পরে that selection is saved, right? So which sentence do we select? The one that answers the question. So here the question is, select the sentence that distinguishes cattle and sheep susceptibility to ragwort. So এটা একটা পোকা, cattle মানে গরু, sheep মানে ভেড়া. They are affected by this poka in different ways. So one of these sentences will describe exactly that. Maybe sheep die and cattle kind of just get a slight rash and then they move on. They don't really get severely sick from that. So any of these one of these sentences will explain that concept, and we're expected to select that sentence. That's all. So that's those different types of reading comprehension passages that we commonly face. Just to kind of wrap up, the first one was we're expected to choose one answer based off of what is implied in the passage. Second type was we're expected to choose one or more options, and the final one was to actually select a sentence that answers one of these questions. Right on. So that's all from the verbal portion of the test. As you know, the GRE has a verbal, a quant, and an argumentative writing section. So we just covered the verbal part very quickly. What we'll do is, after our demo class today, we'll email you a diagnostic test, one for verbal and one for quant. We expect you to kind of take them today, tomorrow at your own time, and you'll have an understanding of where you stand right now without really prepping seriously. So what that'll help you do is, it'll give you a basic understanding of where you are and then you kind of look through different resources. We can help you with that as well, and you determine a goal for yourself. Without prepping, I'm at a 290 and I want to get to 320. So that's the amount of points I need to kind of gain. And ওটা কিভাবে করতে পারবো? If I go through this program, if I study myself, a resources গুলো complete করি, usually if you pay attention and follow through with the homework and everything, our 3-month program can get you to your desired score level. That's how we designed it. যে তোমার একটা reasonable goal set করলে ওই গোলটা reach করা যায় এই 3 months of focused studyর মাধ্যমে. All right, we'll talk about total scores and the other section in a little bit. First, let's go through the different types of questions that appear on the quantitative part. So we have 4 different types of questions that you may expect to find on quant. The first one being quantitative comparison. Second one is multiple choice, one answer. Third one, multiple choice, one or more. And then the final one is numeric entry. These are pretty simple the question types are very, very simple to get. What's difficult is for quant, you need a basic understanding of quantitative concepts. You won't get trigonometry or, you won't get geometric theorems or any of that stuff that you need to memorize, but you do need to kind of have a very good grasp of high school level or, a little bit of higher level mathematical concepts, which are very basic, but then the application of it within a timed, time restrictive environment is going to be a little challenging. So এগুলো কোন concept areas থেকে question গুলো আসে? Number 1, arithmetic. You can see the different subcomponents here: integers, fractions, exponents and roots, decimals, etc. algebra, geometry, and data analysis. So এই কনসেপ্ট এরিয়াসগুলো থেকেই কোয়েশ্চেন আসবে, এটার বাইরে থেকে কখনো কোয়েশ্চেন আসে না। So what was the first type of question here? Let me kind of have iCryptonite, I think. Yeah. Could you read the first question over here?
Yes, Maya. If 5x plus 32 equal to 4 minus 2x, what is the value of x?
Okay. So what is the value of x based off of this equation? As you can see, this is a pretty basic question. Usually doesn't appear on the GRE. It's a very overly simple question. We have to select a single answer choice. So we solve this equation, find the value of x, and just the one that's correct, we choose that. This is one of the different multiple choice question types, where we only have to choose a single answer. Let's say if the equation was quadratic, like x squared plus something equals something, and then we were expected to solve the value of x. Obviously, we would have two different answers, right? So ওই ধরনের কোয়েশ্চেনগুলোর ক্ষেত্রে we won't have a single answer choice question, or maybe they would specify a condition like what's the positive value of x, তখন হচ্ছে আমাদেরকে পজিটিভ ভ্যালুটা চুজ করতে হইতো, ঠিক আছে? অথবা larger or smaller value of x, তখন আমরা এই কোয়েশ্চেন স্যাটিসফাই করতো। Other times for these types of questions, for these types of prompts, we would have a different type of question, যেটা আমরা দেখবো এখন। So can I have Nilormi read this question here, please?
Sure, Bhaiya. The first one, like which two, or the passage?
Right here, this one.
Okay. Which two of the following numbers have a product that is between -1 and 0? Indicate both of the numbers.
Thank you.
Should I read out the options?
No, we don't need to read the options right now. So which two of the following numbers have a product? Product মানে হচ্ছে multiplication result, right? A times B. Product that is between -1 and 0. Indicate both of the numbers. So আমাদের কাছে চারটা অপশন আছে. We need to kind of take each option, multiply it with the, let's say A and B একবার করে দেখবো, A and C একবার করবো, A and D একবার করবো. We don't always need to kind of work out the final answer, just basics use করে, guess work করে অনেক সময় করে ফেলা। A and B multiply করবা, minus and minus is positive, right? And it's a whole number and whole number multiplication. It's obviously going to be larger than this, right? Basically, a questionটা দেখলে বুঝবা between -1 and 0 মানে it's a fraction and a negative fraction, right? It's a negative fraction. So এটা যদি positive হয়, any of the positive answers won't qualify to be chosen. So এইভাবে আর কি you find which ones work, ঠিক আছে? And এখানে বলেই দিচ্ছে যে দুইটা অপশনই রাইট হবে, যে দুইটা মিলে এইটার মাঝখানে রেঞ্জটা তে একটা অ্যান্সার প্রোডাক্ট বের হবে। সো এই দুইটা just choose করে দিলেই you'll find the correct answer. And like I said, the previous quadratic equation এর যদি ভ্যালুস বের করে বলতো যে which values of x are accurate, তখন হচ্ছে আমরা এরকম করে দুইটা অপশন বা এরকম করে অপশনসগুলো চুজ করতাম। Final type of numeric entry question. Who do we have here? Aisha, can you read out this question, please?
One pen costs 25 cents and one marker costs 35 cents. At those prices, what is the total cost of 18 pens and 100 markers?
Right. So it's a very easy question. It's a unitary method question. All we got to do is multiply some things, find out the answer, and then do what? We have to type in the question. Since it's a digital test, এখানে mouse click করব, তারপর আমার keyboard-এ I'll type in the correct answer and then go on to the next question. So that's why it's called numeric entry, because we enter numbers directly into the field and we don't choose from options for this. For these questions and any other questions in the quantitative section, you always have a stowaway calculator right here. The calculator sign থাকে. You click on the calculator and then a calculator, this is the exact GRE calculator, appears on screen. এখান থেকে to just maximize হয়ে এই জায়গাটাতে চলে আসবে where we can type in with our keyboard like 100 times 2.25 etc., and then plus something something equals. So we can do the whole thing in the calculator and then just simply click transfer display, and the answer can directly be copied over to the selection box. So that's like a quick shortcut for going through the numeric entry questions, where you don't actually have to copy over your answer after you calculate with a calculator. But if you do it in your head, you'd obviously have to type it in. So we're done with a couple of different question types. Number one was the multiple choice ones, where we had one and then we had one or more type. Then we had numeric entry, and the final type of question is quantitative comparison. All of us may not have experienced these questions before. It's a little uncommon than our school studies. What this question essentially means is that we have to compare between quantity A and quantity B, decide which one is bigger, or if one or the other isn't bigger, then they might be equal. So if they're equal, or if you can't determine the exact relationship between the two. So the options that you see right here, A, B, C, and D, are always the same for quant questions, but you have to determine whether A is big. If A is big, then you always choose A. If they can't be determined, then you always choose D. If B is greater, you choose B, and if the two are equal, you choose C. So as you go and kind of practice a couple of quant-com questions, you kind of don't forget, you stop reading the options in the entirety, and you know which options mean what, and you just kind of, in the exam, kind of go with your understanding of whether they're equal, then you directly choose C. That becomes kind of very automated for you. And although it's not technically a different type of questions, but a different setup of questions is data interpretation. And these data interpretation questions usually come from data analysis concepts. What they are is, if you remember, we had mensuration part from our high school maths. These are usually data sets given, and then based off of that data set, we have a couple of questions. So think of these as like reading comprehensions for the quant section. In these data interpretation question sets, when based off of this data set, you have to answer a couple different questions. They can be all of the questions can be multiple choice with only one option to be chosen, or they can have a mix of different question types, like the data entry, the multiple choice selection from the given options, etc. Right, so that's all from the quantitative section demo part. I think we had a table in this. Let me just quickly navigate to that part. A table explaining the number of, just give it a minute to load. Right. So, can I have Fuad kind of read out what each section has in terms of number of sections and allotted time, so we can all kind of follow through with you?
Yes, we actually have 4 sections. So the first one is analytical writing. So it has one section, and we'll be given 1 hour to finish that. And then we'll have verbal reasoning. So there will be 2 sections of verbal reasonings. An allotted time has been given 30 minutes for each section. Then we have quantitative reasoning. There are also 2 sections for that, and we'll be given 35 minutes to finish each sections. And then we have one unscored section, which can either be from verbal or quantitative reasoning. So the allotted time will be 30 or 35 minutes, depending on whether we'll be facing verbal or quantitative.
Perfect. So thank you for going through that. I guess you already knew the structure of GRE beforehand, because you didn't have any confusion regarding the unscored section. So as you can see, there's also the number of questions that you face in any given section provided right here. You can find this table on the GRE FAQ page of our website. What this shows is what you'll actually face on your test day, which can be 3.5 to 4 to 6 months away from now, based on when you're most confident taking the exam. What we plan to do to get you ready to take on all of this stuff, this is a whole lot of stuff and a long exam, is to kind of put you through this difficulty, this arduous journey, kind of mock that and get you used to solving a whole lot of GRE questions at one go, a little bit of it at a time. Okay, so our setup here is to have you kind of study particular section of quant for 2 to 4 hours in the first half of the week. Like I said, this is just an example. You could do verbal at the first half of the week, depending on when your batch is and when we actually start the batch. But yeah, half of the week you end up studying quant, other half of the week you end up studying verbal. We want your brain to be, on quant mode or on verbal mode, so you kind of have that focus and you're reflecting back on your problems at a particular time of the week. And then right after you've crunched through a bunch of practice problems, we give you an opportunity to sit with a mentor and address all of your queries. Because what a lot of competitor prep companies get wrong, or a lot of students studying by themselves get wrong about the GRE practice mode, is we solve a bunch of questions, like 1,000 questions, and then we don't review each question properly. The trick to getting your scores up is to address what you're doing wrong and not repeat that mistake ever again. If you manage to do that, then you can see real results in your prep. And we also add on the vocabulary practices. A lot of prep companies don't bother. They just tell you to, study vocab. We don't do that. We actually assign you practice lists, and then we follow up by taking a monthly vocabulary game session, so that it's kind of in practice. You guys don't forget to do it, because you're eventually going to sit through that vocab practice as well. The plan is to have you go through untimed practice sessions during month 1 of quant, verbal, and analytical sections. That means the whole GRE. All the while you're prepping verbals like vocabulary, so that your understanding of analytical and verbal question types are increasing. Month 2 is the exact same number of weeks and exact same number of tasks, but all of these have a timed element added to the practice, which means you're going to be having that time constraint added. You feel that pressure of time running out. You have to do it. Instead of taking 5 minutes to solve one math question, you're now going to have to really solve it under 1 or 1.5 minutes, which is the actual exam hall condition. And then finally, in month 3, you're going to take 4 full mock tests, which with a bunch of competitors at the same meet at the same time doing it, so you kind of have that simulated exam hall experience that you'll find will kind of prepare you to be less unnerved or less nervous during the actual exam. So after you go through 3 months of this, we expect that you'll be able to kind of be very confident in taking the exam and hopefully get the desired score. This is the URL where you can land and find more details on the program that we're offering. We have special Ramadan timings, so that you're not tired right after eating your iftar and a large meal, and then you don't want to kind of sit down and study. So for the review classes, we'll have, we'll take a poll of all the enrolled students and kind of find a special time that works for everyone. You can see the pricing here. It's stricken off with the special discount that you guys participating the demo can avail. Yeah, that's all from me. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them.
হ্যাঁ, আমি জানতে চাচ্ছিলাম আমাদের ক্লাস টাইমিং এর ব্যাপারটা, যে আমাদের কয়দিন উইকের ক্লাস হবে and টাইমিংটা কি হবে?
Acha. So like I said, there are 2 classes in a week. ঠিক আছে, ক্লাসটা 1.5 hour ডিউরেশনের হবে. One of the classes you'll do one subject, let's say quant. The other class in the week you'll do the other subject, let's say verbal. ঠিক আছে. When will it start? Which day of the week will it start? Depends on which cohort you join. So after you enroll, you'll talk to our teaching assistant. He will set you up in the right batch and right timing for you. ঠিক আছে? So you don't have to worry about the timing. It'll be pretty flexible in terms of, once we choose it, it will be set for the rest of the duration of your batch, but we'll kind of take your opinion into consideration while choosing the time of the class. We understand that 8 to 9:30 won't work for everyone during Ramzan, so we're trying to accommodate your needs in this process. Okay, Fuad?
Yes, bro.
Any other questions? iCryptonite, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Yes ভাইয়া, আমাদের রিসোর্স গুলা কিরকম হবে, like book or something, or like
Acha.
some sheet or PDF?
Right. So each task will be accompanied by, let's say, a video lecture that maybe a concept explainer যেটা তোমার লাগবে in terms of a video. You'll get that video. Google Classroom এ হচ্ছে যে সব resources organized আছে. So you get access to a video that you'll watch, and then followed by that you'll take a quiz. Quizটা হচ্ছে Google Forms এর মধ্যে থাকবে. You'll take that quiz and then you'll receive the right and wrong answers in a PDF. ঠিক আছে? You can choose to go through the answer explanations yourselves, so you have a little control over your understanding. But after that 2 days of solving that question, you'll have that review class with the mentor, and then you can address your questions with the mentor. And in a batch setting, maybe someone else has got a question wrong that you got right, but you got it right by accident. When they put forth their query, you'll find that clarification helps you kind of get your understanding even better. So your question probably was whether you will need to buy any books or not. You don't need to, because tomar structure of the course is that you will be given what material that you need to kind of get through each task, and that ওইটা দিয়ে হচ্ছে তোমার complete prepটা complete হবে. But what resources we've used in the prep section to build that curriculum is given right here in the free resources section of the website. ঠিক আছে? So all the resources used in the gamified GRE group prep, if you visit this web page, you'll find যে আমরা কি কি resources use করছি, including the diagnostic test, the vocabulary, etc., etc. Everything is included here.
Okay ভাইয়া, thank you.
Cool. Nilormi, did you have any questions? Nilormi is probably AFK. So I'd like to end the session right here. Thank you for attending, everyone. Those of you.
আমার একটা কোশ্চেন ছিল।
হ্যাঁ, বলো Fuad.
আমি জানতে চাচ্ছিলাম যে আমাদের কোয়ান্টিটেটিভ সেকশনে কি সবসময় ক্যালকুলেটর ইউজ করতে পারবো, নাকি কোশ্চেন টু কোশ্চেন উপরে ভ্যারি করবে এটা?
No, the calculator is always, ওই buttonটা is right there on the top right. Choose করলে calculator expand হবে. You'll be able to use. You won't need the calculator for every section of every type of question. Even মানে quanটের প্রত্যেকটা কোয়েশ্চেনের জন্য লাগবে না, but you do have the option to use it anytime you want to. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So any little questions, tips and tricks, strategies that you need, your mentors there to help you out. Our mentors are all 320 plus scorers and very good at acing these standardized tests. So don't worry, whatever queries you have, whether you just started prepping or are in the latter stages, wherever you are, our mentor will be able to help you with your custom experience that you require. Okay, so I'm ending the session right here. I'm glad that I was able to keep it short because we started at a very late hour. Thank you everyone who were here today and who are watching this later at home. Take a look. If you have any questions, be sure to contact us through email or WhatsApp. Okay. Thank you for attending, everyone.
Thank you, Bhaiya. Thank you.
Good night.